everyone, welcome back to Music Chat with Wendy and Barb. We are inside this week due to the extremely hot weather outside, so we've come indoors to give ourselves a little break. We hope that you enjoyed today's presentation of a great hymn, Lift Every Voice and Sing, which we're doing in honor of the 4th of July holiday that's coming up in a few days here. And we found out some really great things about this piece. I really didn't know a lot about the background and history, but I found out that it was written by a couple of Floridian brothers who grew up in Jacksonville. And Barb, tell us a little bit about what you found, and I'll help you along here as we go.
You know, I agree. What an honor to be able to research these two brothers and this man who wrote the lyrics to this piece, because wow, you know, I always knew it was the Black National Anthem, but I had no idea about who the person that wrote it. And I think it's kind of interesting. His name is James Weldon Johnson, and his brother's name was John. And they come from a really interesting family. Real quickly, I'll tell you that his great-grandparents lived in Haiti, but it was called something else back then, but now it's Haiti. They left during a revolution, and the great-grandfather took their children along, and they were headed to Cuba, but they were usurped by pirates. And so instead of going to Cuba, they ended up in Nassau. And so his great-grandparents settled there. His grandfather, his grandfather, that's right, became one of the first elected officials in Nassau. And so here, that wonderful life of public service for his whole family began in that situation. It's really interesting. I could never find out when they actually moved from Nassau to the United States, but he did indeed, with his father and his mother, live in Jacksonville. And he was born in 1850. Oh, no, so sorry, it's 1871, and he died in 1936. So this was kind of an interesting time anyway in our country and in history. And his mom was a teacher, and she was also a musician.
Well, not only was she a teacher, but she was the first black educator in Jacksonville.
I'm not surprised.
Or actually in the Florida public schools.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah.
Right.
And so he came from a family, again, that valued education and public service. He started out, of course, being educated by his mom, but he ended up going to Atlanta University, which back then was a black college, and he completed his bachelor's degree, and he did a bit of graduate work there as well. And he came back to Jacksonville and taught. But his love, well, he had many. He was a Renaissance person. His love was literature and words and writing, and very prolific all of his life. Let's see, he was 16 when he went to Atlanta University, so he started out pretty early. And what happened was he and his brother, John, in the great migration of the South, left Jacksonville and they went to New York City. And his brother John is the musical one, and together they had some songs on Broadway. I mean, they went ahead. They had some success with that.
Well, I think before they moved to New York, the James who went to Atlantic University, he started practicing law in Florida. He was one of the first, maybe the first black lawyer in Florida. I think the first to be admitted to the Florida bar.
Right. I don't know. I don't know whether that was before or after.
I think it must have been before, because I think they together then left Jacksonville and decided to, they really wanted to I think be in an area where they could practice their love of the arts and things and use it in bigger service.
And there was more opportunity.
Exactly. And they really initially thought they could just use their writing talents and their music talents to get started in New York, and then the Broadway, they were able to write for Broadway at that time.
One little thing back to the law situation, he really taught himself how the information he needed to be able to pass the bar. And there was someone in the room when he was taking the test that left because they could not stand the thought that a black person might possibly pass the bar exam. Back then. And that's the thing, one year after experience, he had to deal with that racism all through his life, and even his great-grandfather all through his life.
I read where at one point when he was still in Jacksonville, he became the principal of the school there.
Stanton School.
Stanton School, which became sort of the setting for when our piece was written and the circumstances for which it was written for. But I understand that he made less than half the salary of his white colleagues who were in the same job.
Of course,
it's typical.
But in spite of all that, it seemed like his goal was to be a valuable public servant in whatever he did, and it really just permeated his life, and and he had so many accomplishments. Eventually, he ended up as president of the NAACP. He was a strong advocate and went around the country trying to let people know about that organization. Just all those kinds of things were just so important.
And one of his biggest pieces of work within the NAACP was his work on anti-lynching.
Yes, that law.
Yes, anti-lynching. A lot of his, he did a lot of reports on it, investigations about it, helped pass laws, that helped with the prosecution of lynchers and things like that.
People were lynching and nobody was being, there was no consequence for it. It was called the Dyer, D-Y-E-R, anti-lynching law. It was 1919. So
amazing.
I know. So many things. And getting back to the song, are we ready to talk about the song, or you have something else you want?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, it seems to me like when you look at the lives of the two brothers, we're talking more about James because he had such a variety of titles, roles, and activist, songwriter, poem writer. He was obviously was an officer in the NAACP. He practiced law. He gave speeches. He taught at the university. He had all these different hats. And it almost seemed like he did the music thing a little more on the side. Like he started out doing that for bread and butter, and then it was kind of a hobby that he joined up with his brother and Bob Cole, I think, was another, they were sort of a trio really of interacting with their lyrics and music, but his brother, and I think he might have gone by Rosamond.
He did, John Rosamond.
Yeah, J. Rosamond.
Yeah.
He was a career musician. He had a lot of hats too, but they were all art hats. He was a musician and an actor, and he was in the original production of Porgy and Bess, and there's all kinds of producer, vaudeville musician, wrote minstrel shows and things like that. So
that's amazing.
So he had a lot of hats, but they were all sort of in the same bucket. So one was sort of a career musician, one was a career activist really, and used the music side of his talents to sort of help express.
I think for James, it was more the writing part of it, as we do. I'm the words person, you're the music person, and not that I'm not a music person, but you know what I mean when we're writing, that's the way we kind of work. And I believe that John, when he was at university, he was at Fisk University for a while, and they had a chair for him then. He was also one of the first black professors at New York University. James.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No,
Yeah.
it's James, not John.
Yeah.
James served in university posts where he was teaching literature and that
Right.
sort of thing. So I think that was his love and his strength, and he just used all of his talents to get support and to try to educate the black community about,
Absolutely.
and to change laws. He's amazing.
Yeah,
Really amazing.
I remember visiting Washington as a kid, and you'd go and you'd see, George Washington's life at Mount Vernon, and they would start saying how, well, he was a fireman, and he was an architect, and he was a farmer, and he was, the builder of the city of Washington, and I just remember sort of being sort of floored by, my little life, I do like this much, and when I was reading about these two guys, especially where James is concerned, I had that same feeling like I've done nothing.
I know, you do feel that way, don't you?
I mean, this is a guy who really had a lot of talent for many, many things.
And courage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Courage. And I'm sure that he was brought up that way because of what his family had to
Absolutely,
face,
I understand the father was the head like the head waiter
That's right.
One of the luxury motels, St. John's Hotel in Jacksonville. St. James or St. John's, I can't remember, but it might have been St. James after the river.
Although it's the St. John's River.
It's St. John's, yeah.
So it's probably St. John's.
So, and I wonder if it's still there.
I don't know.
But, he had risen through a level of achievement too. So there was a lot of good foundation with the parent background and all that.
And good education,
but
as good as he could get at that
I think
time.
about that he was pretty young when he wrote the words to this. A lot of that part of his life hadn't happened yet.
Right.
He was still in Florida and still working in Jacksonville, and
As a
there
teacher.
was an occasion at the school where they were going to have, of all people, Booker T. Washington, another little name to drop, was coming to visit the school. And it was going to be on Abraham Lincoln's birthday. And so he wrote this poem in honor of Booker T. Washington, but as a tribute to what the ceremony was about, which was Lincoln's birthday. And so that's where this song actually got its start from.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I saw 1900 as the year that the lyrics were written. And you think, well, 1900 is just 35 years after Lincoln was assassinated.
Right.
And boy, that's just a tiny speck of time. So a celebration like that was, we think about Lincoln's birthday today and it seems like such a long time ago. But when he was living, it was yesterday.
And they were still, not that we're not going through struggles today, believe me, but the struggles were very, very, very real for black communities at that time. And the words express the struggles and the pain, but yet there's just the carrot at the end of the stick is the liberty. And it is the essence of the song. And he certainly was poetic, I will tell you that.
Yeah, I'll read.
It is amazing.
I read in one of the, this is just from a Wikipedia article about the history of song. It says the song is a prayer of thanksgiving for faithfulness and freedom, with imagery evoking the biblical exodus from slavery to the freedom of the promised land. It's featured in hymnals across the land and sung in churches still now today. I understand as early as the 20s. Now it's had a lifespan of 20 years. It started to appear in black hymnals, African American church hymn books, and often was pasted into the back, like we sometimes do even today with a new favorite hymn.
True.
And so it started to have that life of prominence at that time, and then probably I would suspect through his work with the NAACP, he having such a big name, being such a big name in that organization, and having had this history with the song and whatnot, probably was part of the reason it became so well known, and was able to be well known, because he certainly had the status to have that
to make it
to
known.
start
and
having
to
feelers out into the community.
To put it in hymnals, it's in almost every Protestant hymnal, which is very impressive. You know? And I will say, pretty soon we're going to be singing it, but it's not especially simplistic to sing this hymn.
His brother it turns out, was a pretty, I think, great musician. I don't know a lot about him. I'm going to find out more, though, because I've got my curiosity aroused now. But he obviously had a really good sense of harmony, and did not always use the simplest choice of harmonies. His harmonies are interesting, and they're very leading to where the music calls it to go, I think. And I think it's a very enjoyable piece of music, and
it's powerful.
In many standpoints.
And I have visions of people marching to it, but again, it's 6/8, I believe, so it's that
triple meter. A lot of our gospel, definitely a gospel traditional kind of thing.
And we go back even with Blessed Assurance, those triple
same
things. It just is uplifting. But for this, the fact that it's 6/8, I know this is kind of a musical thing, but it's so different than just having a 2/4 thing, because you feel that pulse of the da da be da 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 da, and it has so much more power. So,
it does a sense of moving forward. And we still are clinging to that. We're still trying to move forward all these years later, and the words are as relevant now as they ever are.
Absolutely.
One other kind of fun story about it is after Rosamond finally wrote the music to the words, it was I believe the first performance of that, with the musical performance of that, was at that same area in Jacksonville. I don't know if it was the same school, but it references that it was at the school where that their mom was teaching at. It was for a graduation ceremony. And so they've been singing it ever since. And we're still singing it today.
That's right. When we go back to the Booker T. Washington visit, they mentioned 500 school children standing there and reciting the poem. It was not yet a song. It was just the poem. And then later his brother, John Rosamond, put the melody to it. So bravo to both of those guys.
Yes, and I just when James passed away, it was a car accident, I think, or something. What car accident was it?
You know what? His wife was driving, and a train hit the car.
That's right. Yeah. But what I remember, the reason I bring it up is this was in New York, of course, and there was over 2,000 people they estimate at that funeral. And in that time period, it wasn't, it
was in the 30s.
I just think 2,000 people in New York, going to this funeral for an African American guy, says a lot about who he was.
And by then he was the president of the NAACP.
So
he
very
had a
well
lot
known,
of influence
and had a lot of influence at the time, and I just have nothing but admiration for these two guys.
Like I said, it was such a privilege to be able to read about them.
It really was.
About both of them, because, wow, what a well-lived life.
I think so. And, here we are, into the next century. Taking it with us and trying to continue on.
And usually we perform the piece because we love to do that. I just kind of felt like this one needed a few more voices. It has power when you hear many voices singing this. And we found a version that I think is going to be powerful in that way. Plus it's the words are there, and you'll be able to sing along. And that's the way that it's going to be part of your heart. So I really...
And I'll just say, I dare you not to sing. I don't think you can do it.
You can't.
It's very inviting in a way to want to sing along with it. So that's definitely a credit to these two wonderful men who gave us this piece of music.
That will endure forever, I'm sure.
I hope so.
Yeah, so enjoy singing it. We did.
And we'll see you next time on the Music Chat.
Bye.